This ZeroNow program is brought to you with the support of our founding partners.
We've got an amazing panel today to share their insights and expertise. David Sturtz, we'll start with you with Sturtz & Company, newly formed and breakout, but I'd love to hear a little bit about your background and your connection to the overall topic of master planning for secure schools.
Thank you, Ara. Glad to be here. Again, my name is David Sturtz, and I've been doing facilities master planning across the country since 2012, about 60 plus different communities around the country, and working on about $6 billion worth of projects. Had the opportunity prior to that to run a small tutoring company, so always been in the ed space, either from the teaching side or the facility and bond planning. So the perspective here, and when you look at a master plan, which is how many buildings in what condition and what configuration, locations, can I afford to support at the high level to meet my goals and meet the needs of my community? That's the driving question, that no one single data set is a dictator. You've got to pull the threads on the different considerations and see how they impact the other. So the contributions to this conversation is looking at the question of school security planning in the context of facility master planning, and knowing when you squeeze one into the bubble, it affects the others. So just some context around that.
Awesome. And we're going to learn about those pulling those strings with James, with your experience at Fargo Schools. James, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
You bet. Thank you. My name is James Hand. I'm the Director of Facilities here at Fargo Public Schools. I've been with the district for about 3 years, and prior to that, most of my career was on the construction side, so on the construction management side, and in building facilities, education, correctional, private, all sorts of projects there. But my department, basically, we're responsible for making sure our facilities are safe, clean, and comfortable. And as mentioned, we recently went through a pretty extensive process working on following our long-range facility planning process and a facility condition assessment, really diving into working on planning forward for future facilities, for modifications to existing facilities, and what that means. And a really important part of that was the safety and security of the physical space. So looking forward to the discussion today.
And yeah, we're going to dive into your experiences, James. So looking forward to that. And last but not least, Mr. Guy Blissner. And I have to point out that Guy Blissner is the 2025 honoree. He's starting to blush right now. 25 honoree of the Emily Parker National School Safety Leadership Award, which will be presented at the U.S. Capitol on December 2nd. So, Guy Blissner, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
My day job is as a school safety and security analyst for the State Board of Education in Idaho. I've done something on the order of 1,200 risk, threat, and vulnerability assessments in schools. When I have a little bit of side time, I am a board member of the NCSSD. I helped create the Foundations of School Leadership course that we're running currently and will be available for educators at RSU via their Albion Center for Professional Development. I served as a member and wrote the draft of the emergency operations section of the ASIS School Safety Standard. I am this year's president. Shortly after I get the award, I get to give up being president for the National Council on School Facilities as well, and get to move into a little less rigorous as the immediate past president. But my understanding of this has grown because I've had a foot in education, a foot in security, and a foot in facilities. And that nexus, the very symbiotic relationship that exists, became clearer and clearer to me moving forward.
No, fantastic. I mean, this is going to be a great discussion, and your experiences will tie it all together. Now that we've introduced our panelists, we'd love to hear from our attendees. So if you wouldn't mind just posting in the chat who you are, what organization or what school district or school that you're with, please do that. And also, if you've got a question for the panelists, please hit the Q&A button, and that'll go to the panelists. We'll take those as we go on with this conversation. So, Guy, I'm going to start with you. Because starting with definitions, and then we'll go into greater depth on this. So, how do we define a safe learning environment, and what exactly are we protecting? What does that mean? Oh, Guy, you're muted.
Apologies. Safe learning environment is one of those things that depends on the definition that your community has determined for that in exactly the way adequate education is defined that. But it also addresses the risk, threat, and vulnerability that's unique to each school. A good friend of mine often says, when you've seen one school, you've seen one school, and that's absolutely accurate. So, but one of the things we always have to remember, and I am a K-12 security specialist. I don't do anything else. I don't have a lot of insight to anything else. But security, by its definition, is the protection of assets. I believe that the assets we need to protect in the K-12 environment are first people always. And second must be the educational environment, our ability to meet the mission. If a loss prevention specialist working in retail lowers shrinkage by 2 percentage points, but it costs them 40% of sales to do it, he may have missed the point. And I think that's where we are in education. We need to understand that at the end of the day, we have to meet the mission of educating the next generation.
On that note, thank you, Guy. And James, at Fargo Public Schools, when did you begin your master planning process, and how did you define a safe learning environment at your district?
So as far as when we started planning, I'd say it was about 2.5 years ago when we realized we needed to sort of do a a reset on our plan, because a lot of our uh, our long range plan was sort of this annual review of, well, we think next year we should do this. And not that there wasn't, I shouldn't undermine, I'm sure there was some good thought put into that, but we really needed to reset. And what we found when we did it, we performed a comprehensive facility condition assessment and study of the programmatic space and getting into long range planning. We just found that our priorities were not where they needed to be. So we actually completely shifted from what some of the previous actions we were going to take moving forward. But then once we evaluated the condition and the adequacy of the space, and we got into our long range planning process, which established sort of what are the major actions that need to occur, what assets in our portfolio are we going to improve, what assets are we going to replace. Right then and there, it was all right. If we're going to do this, we need to start putting the standards in place so that we do this with intent, and that we also don't have to go through this same process, a dozen different times on a dozen different projects, or actually more than that. But going forward, that every time we have a major action or a project that we're planning, we don't have to ask the same questions over and over and over and over. It's a lot of time to go through. If you've ever been through a major capital project, or even a small, remodel or a small project, there's a lot of work that goes into working with different engineers and architects and consultants. And if you don't have your standards set, you might end up kind of redefining them every time based on, maybe a shiny toy over here, or what this engineer's priority or this architect's priority. And so we were committed right when we knew that we had a lot of work to do moving forward. We needed to set our design standards and specifications moving forward. And some of that really started during the long range process and even during the FCA, because as you're looking at what makes space adequate for school programming, like, you have to set some sort of baseline for expectation in order to measure that. So at that time, we really measured what the status quo was, and what, from one building to another, if they were going to be equitable within our portfolio, what does that adequate mean? But then once we got past that phase, it really was, okay, here's where we are today, but where do we want to be going forward? And so that's when we really dug deep into establishing these standards and working through with a pretty robust, large team of professionals, everything from electrical engineers to space planners to having Guy and as a part of the team with a specific focus on safety and security of the buildings and making sure that we are not losing focus on that. I think our department's priorities are keeping the building safe, clean, and comfortable. Oftentimes, safety, I think, gets overlooked until it doesn't, right? Until something happens that puts focus on it. And we definitely were intentional from the beginning about we don't want to wait until something happens to prioritize this and make sure that it's embedded in every throughout our standards. So I don't know, Zach, so I have a tendency, as we talked at a time, a tendency to kind of go on and ramble on, but hopefully that addresses the question. But if you'd like me to elaborate on anything, please let me know.
No, it does. And if you, as you mentioned, so why did you want a security professional involved during that entire planning process?
Yeah, I think, I had the fortunate experience early on during our long range planning process. I had questions around safety. We were experiencing some things and was looking for someone to bounce some ideas off and get some feedback from, and got connected with Guy early on in that process. And a lot of things he talked about and some of the pieces that he's already mentioned really resonated. Like, oh my gosh, it is so easy to get distracted by these sort of one-off things that if you're not starting the focus around the operational outcome and what you're trying to get to, you're not going to make good decisions elsewhere. You're going to be chasing these little fires and trying to put them out with some investment that doesn't necessarily fit your long-term priorities. And so we really wanted to take a step back and look at it from that overall view. And when we are putting this together, I think one of my favorite sayings that we've all heard is that ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? If you can, we're designing a new elementary school right now that we're going to break ground in the summer. And the amount of thought that's been put into how the building is laid out and how we, don't have the fishbowl effect when you're, if that's what it's called, but when you're on like a second or third level and you can look out over, and down in and create these scenarios that are a potential safety hazard, whether it's a kid climbing over a railing or if it is something as dramatic as, like a shooter event or something, right? And those design elements that you can have in mind at the beginning cost next to nothing if you're mindful of them during that process. But if you don't think about it until after that school is built and now we need to change walls or change layout and all that gets quite expensive. The earlier you can make those decisions and set those parameters, the greater the return on your investment is, and the greater effect on the outcome. So that's a big reason why we thought it was really important to have someone like Guy involved in this process. I would say also there's this balance, right, between conflicting priorities. You've got, I think of like secure entrances, and an example of the conflict there is you want your schools to be accessible, but you also need them to be secure. And so we run into challenges with like door hardware. And should there be a paddle, button on this door or this door, and should those doors be scheduled? Should they be fobbed? And how that all operates? Which once you dive into that and start looking at a diagram of an entrance, and you look at where people are coming in and going out and how those different mechanisms act with each other. I've got a diagram we put together in our design standards that is pretty pretty complex. It starts with the layout of what we see a secure entrance looking like, which is slightly different than what we had done in the past. And I'm really excited to put it in practice. It's, it looks great on our new elementary school. I'm excited to see it in real life, um, but we made improvements on the layout itself. But then we had really detailed notes on here's how that access works. Here's where our handicap entrance and exit is. Here's where you can fob in, fob out. Here's where guests come in, and how all of that works together. And that's the importance there, is that affects architecture discipline. It affects your electrical discipline. And if you don't have those standards set in place, like, you're going to spend a whole lot of time trying to figure out what the right way to do that is over and over again. So, right. But having those discussions with a group where we have a safety, and we had Guy, and we had someone there from I think like our SPED program to focus on more of like the accessibility piece of it. We had all these different perspectives and perceptions in a room thinking through this, including our facilities folks, and how, keeping in mind, like, well, what does it take to maintain this and operate? How often do these types of things break? So we don't want to go crazy with access control, right? We want to get it at that right balance. And it was so key having everyone, all those different perceptions or perspectives in the same room talking through this and getting it planned. So.
Well, speaking of different perspectives, David, I mean, what tensions do you come across in security planning as part of facilities planning in schools? You obviously want to build a beautiful building that's accessible, but where are those tensions between the two?
Sure. And James and Guy have teed those up. If you go into a sort of let's say you do your master plan and you've decided which buildings you are going to keep for the foreseeable future, renovate, maintain, which ones you're not, and what the second life plan for those are, and so on and so forth. You've got that master plan done. Now you're doing your pre-architectural planning, which is, okay, now we get to dream big. What are we going to do for this major renovation? What are we going to do for this new construction, like James is doing the elementary school? If you sit in a group of citizens, teachers, students, principals, business leaders, and you ask the question, what does a quote 21st century school look like to you? They use words open, flexible, learning on display. The teachers use that, at least. They talk about the ability to see this ecology of learning going on, and it's an exciting atmosphere that's painted with their words. Then you ask, okay, now design a safe school. When you ask that question, you get very different answers. And because the general tension goes along the lines of the ability to observe as in tension with the ability to conceal. And the ability to observe is important on not just the pedagogy side of things, and the idea that you want to have learning on displays. You want adults accountable to adults for doing their work. You want teachers and students accountable to students for doing work, and seeing that learning on display is of value to that sort of school culture, which I'm sure Guy's going to talk about a little bit, about school culture and the protection of that. But it also has safety concerns, not just for a highly observable facility, but because when you ask the question about safe schools nowadays, it is tragically the case that the first thing that all of us think about is an active shooter if you say a safe school. But if I phrase the question, let's pretend you have a big building with 600 elementary kids in it and some adults that work there. what might the safety hazards be for not being able to observe what those adults are doing easily in the classroom with the children? If you phrase that question, now a whole nother set of considerations comes into play. And the reality is with master planning is you don't get to choose one threat. You have to balance them all. And the natural tendency in this work is to think in false dichotomies. We either have a highly observable facility or a highly concealable facility. That's the case everywhere. Pick one. But there's a couple things that are true in here. One, where you fall on that continuum of observability versus the ability to conceal and hide can vary by section of the building, A, and with the right tools can vary by time. So I might be able to have a classroom that's observable for the principal to walk by and easily observe what's going on, or other teachers or other students. Or if I have an extended learning area and I want students to go out into an area, I'm not sending them there if I can't observe them. And so I have the ability to observe for a period of time, but then I could also pull a blind, hit the shade button. I can now go dark. So when we talk about these tensions, the simplest way to boil it down is the ability to observe, learning on display, and to have accountability that comes with that, which is a safety matter. And then the ability to conceal when needed, which is also a safety matter. And that if you can design your buildings with flexing that to greater or lesser degrees, depending upon the space, the region within the building, and if you can do that with the flexibility of time, then you open up a whole new set of possibilities than if you think in just permanent absolute terms.
David just brought up something that's been a tension for all of us in school security, and I'm not a security native. That wasn't my first spot. I taught the wonders of the quadratic equation to 30 disinterested freshmen. So I come out of that space, but there's a multi-hazard planning process that we always talk about engaging in. It's not just one hazard, it's all of the hazards we face. And that's what David was talking about without mentioning, non-custodial abduction and domestic disputes in our office and all of the things. Again, our schools are simply a microcosm of the communities they serve, and all of those elements will reflect themselves inside your school operationally.
Guy, I mean, what question for you? I mean, so how do you evaluate a school as far as vulnerabilities when it comes to the facilities and like David mentioned, in an elementary school, there are certain objectives that you do have from a design perspective. I mean, how do you evaluate those vulnerabilities and then address those vulnerabilities?
Well, evaluation comes, again, it depends on what you're evaluating. You can simply count cameras. That's a physical security evaluation. What stuff do you have? You can evaluate the operational platform. What do you say you do with the stuff you have? And you can evaluate what the people really do. And the reality is the evaluation of the safety of a school is the nexus, the interplay of those three elements. It's what you have, how you use it, and what the expectation is. Do you have good operational practice? Do we follow good operational? I will tell you that 99% of school security failures are human failures. They're not systems failures. And when a human fails, that's a cultural failure. A door blocked open with a rock painted in school colors, when there is a sign on the door that said this door will remain locked and closed at all times, is an obvious cultural failure because they have now institutionalized the workaround of what they say they do. So evaluating how safe, secure, effective you are is not just the physical elements. It's the physical elements, the operational processes, and the people who use them.
Well, we just released that you had a big part in the position paper on foundational physical security. Do you want to touch upon those core elements that are non-negotiable as we discussed?
Well, one of the things, and this came from, again, my discussions with David and my interaction with facilities, uh, based on building code at the time, 66, 7, 8, 9% of schools in the United States do not have an adequate classroom door. Mostly, so we want to look at secure space. First at the building perimeter, control your perimeter, know who's coming in your building and going out. Be able to create a secure space at the classroom level, because we know effectively a secured classroom door has been an effective response to an active shooter situation. I mean, it's proven over and over again. And lastly is that piece that we have to communicate. And if you read after action reports, effective communications is always a problem. And I will tell you that with older buildings here in Idaho, we have some PA systems we can't buy vacuum tubes for anymore. So it's a PA system that's heard and can be that you can hear and be heard from all spaces in the building. It's an intercom system that from any student occupied space you can talk to one or all of the stations in the system. These are things that James has heard because he heard me pontificate on it during some of the meetings. But again, until we have those as the foundation to build on, I'd even go beyond that. It's not the foundation, it's the ground you build the foundation on. You have to have these things before you start doing all of the rest of the things, or those things will fail.
Exactly. And we always go back to the culture aspect because you have the best physical security infrastructure, but that painted rock, like JB, I saw you made a comment on there as well. So since a guy mentioned this, James, in addition to tube-based public address systems, how do you determine what security technologies are essential, which are optional, and what might create new risks or operational burdens during that whole master planning process? How did you apply that in Fargo?
Yeah, I think this was this was a topic that I think Guy had to remind me several times that you it's really easy to put the cart before the horse on this discussion. It's really easy to have your eye on a new system or an upgraded system and think, oh, this is going to be great and it's going to solve, and it might, right? Like it may, but you don't know that if you don't know what you're trying, what that operational outcome is, right? What are your safety procedures and what exactly are you trying to achieve? And I think starting with that, which is what we did really on a couple fronts, when it came to our design standards, obviously we talked a lot about that. We talked a lot about what are our current procedures and processes, when it comes to safety, and how do we make sure that our school infrastructure and technology aligns with that and gives us the ability to do so, right? If we want everyone to be able to be aware when something is announced over the intercom, we need to identify that, in loud spaces like band rooms and gyms, we need to make sure we have a visual enunciator, because if it's just the audio, they're not going to hear it. So identifying, like, it's important that a message, like as Guy said, it's important that a message is able to be received by everyone in the building and that can be communicated from any space in the building. Well, there's your operational outcome. And then it's matching how does your tech stack and your hardware and your buildings match that outcome? What system allows for that to occur? That, as opposed to starting with, on the flip side, you might, that example, obviously, if you started with that would just happen to align with what you're trying to do. But I think there's a lot of things out there that you could invest in that might, not saying anything of it's necessarily a bad investment, but if you're not already set up to for that to be part of your process of procedures, well, then it's probably not going to be adopted, and you might have been able to make a better investment elsewhere that would actually support your process and plans that are in place. So that was the number one. And then we did a next step after we signed our standards, and we did what we called a modern, let's see here, a modern facilities technology assessment and planning process. And so specifically, we got, facilities, IT, our COO, a group of people together who interact with the different, our access control, our cameras, our intercom, all these different systems that currently in our district are very siloed, and there's not a whole lot of integration, and we don't have a great like single pane of glass to view it all. And we knew that we had some challenges there, but we took that time to specifically look at the tech and hardware that we have. What are these? Review those operational outcomes again, and then put a roadmap in place to be able to identify where's the highest priorities, where's the low hanging fruit, what are some things, some steps we can take, over the next 12 months, and what are some that are more the long term changes that with, I'm sure I need as a school district that we have just like revamping a lot of hardware and updating things and adding new systems. But we do have a and making sure it's in alignment is so important. And so now we're taking those first steps to get things up to snuff and to meet those standards that we've established.
James and I had a chat early on about access control, and access control can it will send a text message or an email to a guy that there's a door open. I said, why don't you just put a localized door alarm there that shuts after somebody closes it, and it'll be a self-correcting system. It's like the seatbelt buzzer in your car. Somebody will go kick the rock out of the door and shut the door because they don't want to listen to that racket while they're trying to teach. Again, what we have to look at is common sense answers that are easily applicable to these things rather than complex answers. Complex answers are more likely to fail than base level answers.
Well, exactly. That's looking at technology as a tool to accomplish something that may be more of a challenge. Now, David, James mentioned standards a number of times. What sort of standards are there when it comes to facilities, and especially when it comes to, are there technology standards when it comes to master planning for facilities for a security perspective?
Nothing valuable at the vague level. It's in the details of what problems you're trying to solve. Like I think of these things as a Russian doll. Like when I started doing this the reason we're all here is I started doing a master plan with James 2.5 years ago in the outset of it, and then that as we started to get a handle on the broad facility issues, then you get into, okay, now that we've determined what the master plan is, now what are the standards by which we're going to prioritize our renovation projects and by which we're going to execute them systematically, and what are the specifications by which we're going to build new buildings, right? So asking those sets of questions. And when you're asking those questions, that's when it gets to what actually you can have an intelligible conversation about standards, because you're talking about specific things you're solving for with that foundation below the foundation of access control to the perimeter, to the campus, to the building, to the room, and then ubiquitous instant communications across, like that being the foundation level. Then what are, based upon your solutions to those foundational security elements, what are the specs that you need to have? And then you just iterate as you go, build upon that foundation for other things that you might want to look at, be it room shading tech or different alarm systems or camera systems or whatnot. But it's hard. It wouldn't be helpful, I don't think, to have a broader answer to that question.
There are some available standards on school security that are beginning to see some coalescence in that specific space with the ASIS school safety ANSI-based standard that they've proposed, not proposed, that's in circulation, and the past K-12 guidelines. The reality is, though, all of those are very specific to physical security and some operational elements. You still have to be willing to spend the time with your school community and let them determine what a safe school is for them. Because at the end of the day, if you think it's safe and they don't, you've missed the point.
And
You
that,
know,
yeah,
go ahead,
yeah, no,
David.
it's all right. So that we typically talk over each other because we've had these conversations often, and what we are being safe from, right? Asking those questions, what are the different potential unintended consequences of a solution we're discussing? Because again, we are constantly in a multi-threat environment. James said in the beginning, we don't want to wait till things happen to start doing a plan. Well, the truth is little things always happen. Don't want the big things to happen. And we also don't want, an environment where it's too easy for students to hide all the time. That sets up a whole other set of consequences and vulnerabilities. They might be lower level than the worst case scenario. They are, but they build up over time and they aren't good. We don't want a place where bullies can trap and hide and other things happen in places where you can hide around the building all the time. And so looking again very thoughtfully at what our design strategy needs to be based upon the fact that we need to look at safety in a multidimensional aspect. Safety from bullying, safety from non-custodial adoptions, safety from, we need to be able to observe adults and kids sometimes. We really do.
Well,
We should be able to observe kids at all times.
exactly.
How,
We are in
yeah,
loco parentis to these children, and we have to. And I have people all the time when I'm doing assessments say, "Oh, we don't worry about that because we have really good kids." And I ask them if they know the definition of kid, and that's they go places you don't want them to go, and they do things you don't want them to do. Ergo, we call them children. And the way to avoid that is put eyes on them or lock them out of the places you don't want them to go, and put eyes on them in the rest of the places. So we have to balance that with the fact that, kindergartners are different than eighth grade boys. They maybe sometimes they're very much the same. But as you get older, we expect you more responsibility, and we have to apply for that. But I will tell you that from the security side of the world, the fact that we are always chasing the money to do the things we need to do, if we can get involved with our master planning, our facilities early, that's strategic security planning. That begins to address what we quit chasing the tail of the dog. We get on the front end of leading the dog. We may not get it tomorrow. It may not be deployed in next week, but we certainly have some ability to strategically address the needs at a similar level. And the other piece we get to do then is address the life cycle needs of our security systems, which have been woefully underappreciated.
A couple things came to mind while the two you're talking, and one was flexibility and sort of the mindset that when we were working on our plan, and I think when you're working on any plan in facilities, because facilities are not short-term investments, these assets last, right, for a long time. New school, you're hoping, we're building this elementary school, we're hoping it lasts 80 years. Your solutions have to be flexible enough to adjust, because, for example, one of the things that we talked about in our process was sort of the replacing our panic button, and should that be a system that everyone, including students, has on their phone if they have a phone, and deactivate it from your phone. Well, shortly after we had that conversation, the state of North Dakota eliminated devices in schools. The kids cannot bring a phone to school anymore, which I think may actually be a good thing from a educational standpoint. But from a safety and security standpoint, there's probably a bit of a downside to that, especially if your plan was to allow anyone to hit, a duress button on an app. So I think making sure that when you are moving forward with a new system or a change in that infrastructure, an eye on, like, sort of what if something changes, because it will. Like the only thing that we can certainly rely on is things are going to change as years go by. So that was one thing, and then the other piece that came to mind as Guy was talking lastly here was having this plan together has certainly been helpful when like a grant opportunity comes up. And because we have a plan and we know the things that we want to achieve, and we have our safety and security infrastructure built into our future capital plan, and we know that we have those life cycle pieces ready, when we get a notification that there's some grant opportunity available, we know exactly what we want to prioritize when that comes available, and what we're going to put in our application, and we have a lot of the data and information ready to go. So having a plan that is has the right amount of detail and information, and that outcome desired, all of that is so beneficial, because otherwise you get an opportunity that comes up, and you're anecdotally, like, yeah, we've got needs, but it can be quite a lot of work to try and put pen to paper on that. So that's a huge benefit of, in general, I know the conversation often goes around, do you get funding first or do you get a plan first? And more, I believe so strongly that you just have to start with a plan and then figure out the funding, so that you're either just ready when an opportunity arises, or then you start to build your funding around what your plan is, instead of the opposite. So,
well, and I'm a firm believer that there are some elements of physical plant that are security tools. HVAC systems are a security tool. Anybody who tells you differently has not taught on the west side of a 1960s building with lots of windows in late September and early October. And what we get is the root cause analysis of why those windows are open, is so that, a teacher's going to do that so they can teach. Not only that, there's going to be every Walmart box fan they could purchase sitting in them. And the answer, well, shut your windows, is not a viable answer at that point. The root cause of that is the HVAC system's insufficient to the need. So a lot of things can have overwhelming impact on your security posture that are not typically thought of as security tools.
I think it goes back to like HVAC commissioning, right? And that was part of the advocation for having proper commissioning on a new building or on a renovation, is like, if your building isn't balanced correctly, and at every change of the season, which we experience every year, you get too much positive air pressure. Now your doors don't close all the way, and it's not even necessarily that you've got folks, occupants within the building creating that. It just, when things are out of balance, you're absolutely right. You're creating an unsafe situation. Especially, that's such an obvious one that occurs so often, is the doors don't close all the way unless someone pulls them shut during different times of the year. So it is definitely all connected. And I'm looking at our HVAC, area in our standards, and the safety and security piece there is at least a couple pages worth of bullets. So there's a lot to be said there for sure.
James, you said something, a couple of things that jumped out. Number one, having a master plan allows you to evaluate opportunities versus distractions, right? We talk about technology. I know Guy always talk about robotic dogs and drones and everything like that. What is that addressing in your plan, right, from a security? But also, one of the things that we discussed, David, is baking in security to every aspect of your plan, right? Your master plan. It's not, here's our facilities master plan, and then the last page is an addendum, which is our security aspects. So how do you address that? How do you balance all those things, and how do you bake that all in, David?
Sure. I mean, it's like we all learned computers doing Oregon Trail in the computer room back in the 80s, and it was the place you went. Computers were a separate planning. They had their space, and security has historically been that computer room in K-12, and it's a way you plan everything. It's a part of everything that you're doing. And again, it comes back to what are we solving for? And we are always solving for in a school design more than one thing at a time. Same goes for safety. And so kind of our job in leading any kind of planning process is to interrupt groupthink for a minute and to sit down and really probe. Okay, so let's talk about describe the teaching and learning that needs to happen in this space and in these spaces in this region. Okay, now what is how does this work well? How does the facility need to facilitate that learning in that thing? Great. Now, can we protect that facilitation of good learning while protecting the people as the primary asset? If the answer is yes, you've just hit a home run. If the answer is no, then you encroach on the pedagogy in imposing more on the safety. But you start with the pedagogy and the culture that they're trying to create and preserve. And then you ask, can we do this and have the ability to protect our people in a worst case environment? And can we do this while protecting our children and staff in the less than worst case environments, in the other things that we know we need to be cognizant of and protect? And so just stepping back, making sure we're not just asking one question for one outcome.
No, that makes total sense, David. And we only have 10 minutes left. I can't believe it. I don't know if you guys want to stick around for another hour. But let's take some questions that came in from our registrants as well as participants. So whoever wants to take this, just jump right in here. So Lisa Max, hey Lisa, from the Arc of Loudon in the Aurora School asks, what accommodations should be made for special education private day schools? Are there special considerations from a master planning for a special ed private day school? And I'm guys gonna mention, you've seen one school, right? So it's really looking at the specifics. I might be able to even answer this one, but Guy, I'll let you take us away.
Yeah,
here.
Guy, you start,
I'm,
please.
I'm going to jump. My wife's a special ed teacher and was for 25 years. So this is kind of near and dear to me. And a lot of that depends on what the population of that day school is, and what's their cognitive level. Are they ambulatory, non-ambulatory? Are they medically fragile? Are they not medically fragile? There are so many things you have to look at for specifically those kids, and that means there are some elements you're going to have to look at on ADA accessibility and on accessibility generally, and on notification, because strobes can be a problem, loud noises can be a problem. There are just a number of things that you have to work with, and that means to get down in the weeds with the people as they begin to work this, offer up options and say, how will that work? Will that not work? What's our next option? It's not going to be easy, because these kids are some of our most vulnerable. So we have to be very careful about the security, but the security we provide has to be contextualized to their need.
No, thank you, Guy. David, did you want to add something on that initially?
No, just Guy hit it. Just the same questions apply. The answers are slightly different. Is these, the kids who are high need kids, especially, self-contained special education students, for example, who need ambulatory care and changing and all of that. The same needs apply. We need to make sure that we can observe them, but also conceal them. Like we have to do both. So that's just kind of my drumbeat, is we need to be able to look at how we do both so that we can keep them safe from all circumstances. And how do we have a set strategy, facility design, and human to shift strategy when time necessitates that.
And we also need to be very careful that we're creating we can design things that operationally make no sense. We have to make certain that the operational ability to use that design is there. So we want the people who have to do it's telling teachers to do something without asking them how they're going to get it done. So we need to involve those people as well.
And I would add involving and collaborating with local code officials to work through issues such as that balance of, you know, student safety and like fire code, where you're trying to balance. We don't want to create more than necessary instances of potential seclusion, right? But we also want to protect students from eloping and running out, you know, the door, or, you know, and putting themselves in a harmful situation. And that can be one of the biggest challenges, is where keeping keeping some students stay safe, as safe as possible, is sometimes in conflict with, you know, fire code or other. And working through those types of challenges with the folks who really are in that day in and day out. So getting your if you have a special education director in the same room as, you know, your fire inspector, and having conversations around, I know we get dinged every once in a while on our fire inspections, where we're potentially preventing egress, you know, because of a baby gate or something. And unless you invite that official to come out and see, like, here's why that's there, and talk through that, you might, the outcome of that may be a few things, right? It may be too bad, so sad, you cannot have that baby gate there. It may be, well, okay, maybe this can work through an interpretation, right? Then we won't flag you for it. Or maybe it's a recommendation that you need to go up the ladder and work with the state or the local jurisdiction to make some change, because no code that I'm aware of is 100% perfect today for every situation. So, and if we don't bring those types of issues up, then you know, they'll never change, and we might not be creating the safest environment we can for our students and staff.
Yep. David, did you want to comment on that?
Well, I was actually just looking down the chat a little bit at a related question where Lisa was asking about behavioral challenges of kids, particularly with autism. You know, sheltering in place being a challenge when, you know, their students may not lack the ability to stay quiet and calm. And I was just responding that, you know, the ability to conceal is both, as suggested, auditory and visual. So perhaps, you know, to get down to what, you know, James did so well in Fargo, was take these questions and concerns and put a physical building standard into that. So the acoustic paneling in rooms serving our autistic children, maybe that's more robust. Maybe we have the ability to add, you know, white noise to sort of override sound, coupled with an enhanced dampening. Just thinking through it, like the mini path same summit idea of, you know, being able to flip that switch and have a space that maybe is more acoustically dampened, coupled with the ability to override some sound and sort of conceal the whereabouts, would be a sort of an initial idea.
Thank you, David. Very insightful. We're running out of time here, and we have quite a few more questions to answer. So I will post those in the community, the NCSSD community, actually under the ZeroNow account. So we'll respond to those. But before I'm going to ask David, James, and Guy just to leave their final thoughts and words of wisdom. Before I do ask for that, so I want to remind everyone, our next conversation is, when is that? December 16th, and it's about defending K through 12 from cyber threats. So December is going to be Cyber Month. We're going to be talking about all the different aspects of cybersecurity when it comes to physical security, um, hacking, other aspects of security, how it impacts children inside school, outside of school, and how it impacts your physical security infrastructure. So there's going to be a lot of different aspects on that. If you are a school administrator, superintendent, school board director, etc., We do have roundtables every the week before this program. Also, if you're a school safety director or someone who's in charge of safety and security in your district, become a member of the NCSSD, the National Council of School Safety Directors. Also hosts roundtables with safety directors nationwide to get insights and experiences on the topic. We just had one last week. We had two on this topic, and we'll be discussing cyber next month. So let's wrap things up. And Guy, would love to hear your final thoughts, words of wisdom, one little takeaway that you would like to leave for our participants today.
It's absolutely critical that security people be involved at the outset of this with the rest of the folks. We can't be continuing to do security as a hang it on afterwards, add it later, put it in following the most recent event as a knee-jerk reaction. It will create poor decision making. It will be bad security. It'll end up as security theater. We also have to remember that at the end of the day, just like we have to be able in retail to sell, we have to be able to educate. So that educational environment, preserving it is critical. We're creating castles, not prisons.
Thank you, Guy. James, final thoughts for our participants.
I think one of the best things that we did in our planning process was get the right group of people together, and to be open to, because everyone comes with their lens and background and preferences and all of that and experiences. And I think it's so important in any planning process to make sure that you've got a comprehensive and the right number of people in the room to gather all that, and because otherwise you make a plan and you go for you start to implement, and then at that stage you find out that, oh, we didn't think about this limitation or this potential issue that creates, and now you got to work backwards a bit. So I think getting that right group of people together when you're planning is so critical and an important piece of it. And we're very fortunate that we had a pretty solid team involved in this. And it took a lot of people, a lot of effort. You probably will not underestimate the amount of effort and time you probably won't overestimate the amount of time and effort it can take and that you need to put into this sort of process. But again, that phrase again, I'll throw out there is the ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so the more you can put into preventative measures and thinking ahead and planning, I think the ROI there is absolutely incredible. So that would be my takeaway from our recent experience.
Thank you, James. And David, please, words of wisdom for our participants as they head into their journey.
Just more of a reminder on the question. Before you start down the path of security planning and master planning, write down on the whiteboard with others, what are we protecting? Who are we protecting? And what are the threats that face kids in a school environment every day, from low threat to high threat, and interview folks if they're willing and you're able to talk through those who have experienced some of those different tragedies, and be it from small to large, and to get an insider's view of, when I'm doing this planning, just sort of the three-dimensional things that we need to consider and protect. And when you can, insofar as you can, protect that ability for the facility to facilitate the teaching and learning while protecting the people in it in a three-dimensional way. And that is a thoughtful process that's best done in a group was intentionally open-minded, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, David. Thank you, James. Thank you, Guy. Learned quite a bit today, and hopefully it sounds like from the chat here, our participants did as well. Just want to remind folks, next conversation is December 16th, once again, and we appreciate your insights and experiences and knowledge sharing with all of us, and just want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving next week. And thanks, David. Thanks, James. Thanks, guys. Take care. Stay safe, everybody.